StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book. Well, we got a bunch of books, but one book with this specific topic. One daily masterclass, that's the one you're listening to right now. And all of this is under one umbrella that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is how to be more objective. The definition of this word objective is not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts, F-A-C-T-S, or facts, F-A-X. How to be more objective. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this topic up is because something that I've said about myself is that I'm logical to a fault. I try to be as objective as humanly possible. No human being is completely objective. It's impossible because we are humans and we all have our own biases. We all have our own blind spots in the way that we look at things. But there are things that we can do and certain habits that we can enact, certain ways that we can adjust our personalities and characters to look at things more objectively. And I think this is a really important thing for all of us right now, especially because the way that the news and the media have morphed over the years is that we don't get objective information from them anymore. We have to basically figure it out on our own. So whereas a couple of decades ago, you could get the objective information just by going to what now is Google, but back then I guess would have been a newspaper or a book or to maybe some of your school teachers. Nowadays, you can't get it even from just picking up your phone and a couple taps with your fingers because everything is skewed in a certain direction based on the opinion, based on the emotion and the frame that the person who created that information wants to give you, whether it's a person with a website, a news company that alleges to be objective, and most of them are not, or it's somebody in between who just has a certain angle that they want people to take because everyone is so emotionally driven to get others to agree with them or to see things a certain way. And this is all a bigger conversation that someone maybe smarter than me can explain. But starting with the fact that we all got hooked on social media, we are all on it all the time. We're all on these smartphone devices, even if it's not social media, they're smartphone devices all the time. They basically become attachments of our physical bodies. The way that those things alter our wiring as human beings, or they tap into our wiring, or they alter it, or somewhere in between that, has caused all of us to really be chemically induced to want others to see things the way that we see them, or come to the same conclusions that we come to, or dislike the things that we dislike, like the things that we like. And it's, again, a bigger conversation that I'm not qualified to explain to you, at least not today. But today I do want to talk about how to be a more objective individual to where you can look at these things, and even though you can't get away from them, and maybe you don't even want to get away from them, how you can take in what people are sharing, but still objectively look at it in such a way that you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that you see. You don't have to have the same emotion and everything that you're putting out. Now, some of this, let me be clear as a disclaimer. Actually, before I even get to the disclaimer, let me remind you that I have a text line where I want you to send me a text and tell me the best insight you got from today's episode, or the worst thing that I said, something that you disagree with, that you don't like. My number, 305-384-6894. Once again, 305-384-6894. Now, a disclaimer that I want to give you here is this. Your ability to do this, to pick up on this objectivity and look at things in a less emotional way, is somewhat affected by your baseline character, your baseline personality. I'm the type of person who is not a super emotional individual. As I already told you, I'm logical to a fault, which qualifies me to speak on this topic, but it also disqualifies me with some of you out there to tell you exactly how you can do it. I'm going to give you some overall principles, and you can apply these as best you can, but I don't expect you to become me if you're a very emotional person. You're the type of person who cries when you see Bambi, or you see a movie, or you cry when you watch TV or the internet, you see other people cry and then you start crying. If you're that type of person, you're not going to become me overnight. You probably wouldn't be qualified to teach this topic, but I'm qualified to teach it. I'm going to give you what I can give you, and you can still utilize some of these principles, even though you're not going to become, you're not going to get to 100% on the sliding scale on any of them. If your baseline is, again, being a much more emotional person, a much more empathetic type of individual. So again, the definition of the word that we're talking about here today, how to be more objective, is not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts. Point number 1, questions over conclusions. Let me say that again. Questions over conclusions. To be a more objective individual, resist your urge to jump to conclusions until you have enough information. The news and the media nowadays, today, I've already told you in episode 1777 why you can't trust the media, in episode 1474, stop watching the news. They no longer give you the full objective story. Even if they don't give you the full story, they used to just give you objective facts about what happened. Even if they couldn't tell you everything, they didn't have enough time or space. Nowadays, media and the news, and these are two separate things. Media can even be individuals with a Twitter account or Instagram page. It's not just news companies and corporations. These are individual people as well. They give you a slanted version of what's happening, and that slanted version of what's happening is designed to evoke a reaction in you. It's designed to get you to react in whatever way they want you to react. Now, why is this? Why would the media or news companies or individual people, why do they care? Why would they even want to do this? What do they gain from it? Because what you want to remember in life is that nobody does something for nothing. So anytime you see or hear someone or hear about someone doing something that seems to not make any sense, and your thought is like, why the hell would anybody want to do that? Why would that make any sense? Keep asking the question, because this is the point we're on right here, right? Questions over conclusions. Keep asking the question until you can figure out why this person would do it. What is their angle? What does this person gain from doing this? Because no sane individual, person who has control of their mental faculties, nobody does something for no reason whatsoever. So you need to ask yourself, why would this person do this? Because even if you think what somebody did is stupid, assuming that they have control of their mind, they're not as dumb as you think they are, which means there's something that they can gain or that they do gain from doing what they did. And you want to know what that is. Again, not because you need to think that way, not because you got to do it, but because you just want to understand angles of other people. This will help expand your mind. Instead of labeling somebody who did something that you wouldn't do as a complete idiot, they voted for somebody you wouldn't vote for, or they must be dumb, they must be racist, they must just be stupid, or they must just not know the facts the way that I know the facts. That's probably not the reason. They're probably maybe smarter than you, maybe more experienced than you. Maybe they know more facts than you do. They just came to a different conclusion because they look at things in a different way. And this is why, again, questions over conclusions. You want to be an objective person, you have to ask questions so you can learn more instead of coming to conclusions assuming that you know things about people. And a lot of people these days do a lot of assuming, and this is where the lack of objectivity just becomes a pandemic in itself. So why? So again, when people give you a slanted version of a story, the reason that they're doing it is because the reaction that it evokes in you, at least when it works, it brings you back to them again. Because now you need to know what's the next step. You need to know what else happened. You need to know what you need to do. You need to know how they suggest that you respond. So when the news, let's say, CNN or New York Times puts out a story that gets you to react emotionally, you know what you're going to do? An hour from now or 2 days from now, you're going to go back to CNN or New York Times to see what else they got to say, because it evoked an emotion in you. And there's I'm not going to get into the science of it, but there's a chemical reaction that happens in us when an emotion moves us to action, or moves us to react, or moves us to respond, or moves us to share. On like social media, we have this sharing thing. Anything that puts us in that position where we can share something, we're going to come back to that source. So maybe we can find something else. I have read that when you are the person who learns about some news story first, you're the first one in your group, in your family, or on your business team, or the first one in your mastermind, or the first one in your group message chat to find out about a piece of breaking news that you think would be relevant to other people in that group, and you're the one who breaks the news and tells everybody else what happened, you get a little bit of positive energy and a little bit of, it's kind of like a social lift that you get for being the person who broke the news. because you're the one who knew about it first. You're the one who shared it first. That's why sharing is such a big thing in social media. The person who shares it first, you get the credit. Even on the internet, when I'm looking at things like sports, it happens in the sports industry all the time, that when, let's say, a trade happens in the NFL or in baseball or in the NBA, and the trade gets out and then it becomes a trending topic and everybody's talking about it, I always see the news reporters, the sports reporters, they always are tagging and saying, well, this person had it first. This person broke the news. This person said it first. And I'm like, why the hell does it matter? Everybody knows the news now. Who cares who had it first? But that's a big deal in the sports industry, who broke the story, because breaking stories is kind of like, it's currency in your industry as a reporter. You being the one who breaks a story, that is currency that goes on your resume. And then when it's time for you to negotiate that next contract, that can kind of raise your salary a little bit. And it raises your profile around other people in your industry and maybe with the audience, like, hey, I'm the one who broke that. Remember that story? I'm the one who broke that. I'm the one who knew about it first. So knowing about something first is a big deal. Even if, again, it's just you and your mom, your dad, and your 3 brothers and 2 sisters, you're the first one who knew about it. That's a thing. So even if it's something negative, so CNN tells you something that is negative news, but you're the first one to tell your friends circle about it, you're going to come back to CNN so you can get that lift again and be the first one to know about something else. So this is part of the reason why these companies and individual people as well do these things these days, because they want to be the source for you. And when they're the source for you, you got to keep coming back to them. And when you keep coming back to them, every time you come there, the ads are being served. You got to watch a little 15-second clip before you watch the video. All those things make them money. So money is one of the big drivers behind it, and money follows attention. So they got to get your attention first in order to get the money. All that said, moving on to point number 2. The topic once again today is how to be more objective. Learn to ask the right questions. Now, I just told you in point number 1, questions over conclusions. Now, in point number 2, I'm telling you, you got to learn to ask the right questions. Now, sometimes people ask questions, but they ask poor questions, terribly thought out questions, or questions they didn't think about at all, and it doesn't get them any closer to knowing what actually is going on. In episode 1741, I told you why asking the right question is more important than the answer. So if you haven't listened to episode 1741, go back and listen to that episode now. Just a couple months ago, we talked about that. The right question is the key these days, because if you look at a platform like Google, right? Google has the answers to damn near any question you could ask. The problem is there are billions of questions. There's an infinite number of questions that you can ask, and you ain't got enough time to go through all of them. So in order to get the right information from a site like Google, or the right information from a human being, you got to ask the right question. If you ask the wrong question, they'll give you information. Google will give you information, a human will give you information, but is that the information that you actually need? When you ask the right question, that's when you get the right information. So point number 2 here is you got to learn how to ask that right question. If there's a news story that comes out that says, for example, a police officer shot a black man, people just react before they even know what happened, why it happened, who did it, why they did it, what were the circumstances around it, what happened before that, what happened after that, we don't know. But people just start reacting and saying things before they even know the whole story. So the first thing that you will do now, given the information I'm sharing with you here today, is ask the following questions. Well, why did the shooting happen? What happened before the shots got fired? What did the victim do before they got shot? What did the cops do? What is the explanation of the police officer's action? What will they say about why they did what they did? If you hear, for example, that a politician said XYZ, some quote that they're quoted as saying, allegedly, you should be asking the following questions. Instead of reacting to the quote, ask the following questions. What's the full context of the quote? What they say before and after the actual quote part that we're hearing about? Were they answering a question? Were they joking? Or, again, the context is a part of this. What was said before they said the quote? What was said after they said the quote? Who were they around? Who were they talking to? Without this information, you shouldn't be drawing any conclusions. What you'll notice when you become more objective is that you will ask a lot more questions, and you will learn to sift through the story in order to get to the truth. And there's a big difference between a story and a truth. As they say, there are 2 sides to every story. There's actually more than 2 sides to every story. There are an infinite number of sides to every story, but there's only one truth. And as I told you not too long ago, the truth in life is rarely sexy. I told you that in episode 1777. The truth is not sexy. The truth is not black and white. The truth is usually very gray. The truth is not usually simple enough to put into a simple sentence that just paints the entire situation. It's a lot of gray area in the truth. And this is why many people seem to be allergic to the truth these days, because the immediacy that we have all been trained to want and need in our lives is not fed by the truth. It takes a little bit more time, takes a little bit more patience, a little bit more discipline. And a lot of people, frankly, just don't have it. And people who want to just jump to a conclusion, they get frustrated by the fact that the truth is not so easy to jump to. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how to be a more objective person. See more sides of a situation. All of these points could all be, they're all related to each other here, very directly related to each other. When you're an objective person, this is technically what being objective means. Seeing different sides of a situation. But this is something that a lot of people fail at. They can't see different sides of a situation because they are so emotionally engaged in seeing one way of looking at a situation that they don't want to see another way. And they jump to the conclusion, harking back to point number 2, that anyone who happens to see it differently, there must be something just inherently wrong with that person. And harking back to point number 1, they draw this conclusion rather than asking questions. Instead of trying to learn why another person thinks the way that they think, we just jump to a conclusion as to why they think that way or why they're not thinking at all. Because obviously we must be the geniuses and they must be the idiots. See more sides of a situation. When you hear a story that makes another person seem completely innocent and a victim, and another person in that situation, they must be a terrible demon who is Satan reincarnated, ask yourself the following. What could have been a reasonable justification for what the other person did? Now, the story makes it sound like this person's just a complete idiot and fool who has no brain in their head whatsoever. It's just empty space up there in between their ears. Now, if this person did have a reasonable justification, what would it be? If you were that person's lawyer arguing on their behalf in court, how would you explain your action? And that other side, let's just assume that other person who did something that seems really dumb, let's assume that they're really smart. How would that make sense? From their point of view, how would it make sense for this really smart person to have done what they did, even though you think it's stupid? Your first thought was it's stupid, but you learn to ask questions over drawing conclusions. If this person was smart, how would it make sense, their action? Now again, maybe you don't come up with the best answers to these questions, but just the fact of asking the questions, just the habit of asking these questions will change the way that you think. The habit of asking these questions is a discipline in itself, and that you start looking at things a little bit differently. The habit of asking these questions will give you pause before you draw a conclusion about another person and tell somebody that they are something that they may not be, or you just have a thought in your mind that somebody is something that they're not, usually something negative. Asking the question, what am I not seeing? What question am I not asking? What information do I not have? What things have what circumstances am I not privy to in this situation that's been fed to me that maybe if I knew it, I might look at this thing differently? Am I willing to look at things differently? These are questions that you want to ask yourself. And let me tell you something about people who are objective, people who are smart thinking individuals, critical thinking people. They ask a lot of questions. Whereas more shallow individuals, people who are not critical thinkers, people who are not very objective, they see everything subjectively just based on how they see it. They're unable to see things through other people's eyes. They're unable to put themselves in other people's shoes. They are just not very emotionally or mentally mature. These people don't ask too many questions. They just draw conclusions because they are pretty much sure that they know everything that they need to know. I know a lot of people who fit that description. I also know a lot of critical thinkers. That's how I'm able to talk about it from both angles. All that being said, let's recap today's class, which is how to be a more objective person. Objective defined as not influenced by personal feelings or opinions and considering and representing facts. Point number 1, ask questions over drawing conclusions. Resist your urge to jump to conclusions until you have enough information. I told you in episode 1777 and episode 1474 that you cannot trust media or the news anymore because they don't give you full objective information. They give you a slanted version, which indirectly or directly serves them, but it does not serve you. So you got to be smarter and take an extra step nowadays. Point number 2, learn to ask the right questions. So when you're asking questions, you got to ask the right ones, not just any question. So when you get information, the first thing you should do instead of drawing a conclusion about what you just heard is ask yourself more clarifying questions so you can get a fuller picture of what's going on, not just drawing a conclusion based on your predetermined assumptions about a situation or about a person. Because these days, again, when people give you information, they are giving you something out of context, and without the context, this story can change completely. And I'm sure any of us who's listening to this right now can think of many situations in which something was taken out of context and the story was completely different when you got the full context. So to avoid making an ass of yourself, do not assume that you know what happened in a situation or what caused a certain situation until you get the full context. Therefore, you must have the discipline, enact the discipline of not drawing a conclusion about a situation until you get more information. Point number 3, see more sides of a situation. When you hear a story that makes one side seem completely innocent and the other side seem completely terrible, ask yourself, what if the side that is supposed to look terrible, what if they were actually good? What if they were doing the right thing? What am I missing? What am I not paying attention to? What did I not notice? If I was their lawyer, how would I explain their actions? If they're really smart, 10 times smarter than me, well, how would this situation actually be a good thing to do? What could have been a reasonable justification for their actions as opposed to me just concluding that they must be a complete idiot? When you ask yourself these questions, you will start thinking differently, looking at things differently. You'll be a more objective person. You will stop jumping to conclusions so quickly, and you'll avoid putting your foot in your mouth and saying something based on an assumption rather than based on full information. And one thing that all this requires is that you be a little bit more patient in drawing a conclusion. All that said, I want you to send me a text. Tell me the most valuable insight you got from today's masterclass. Tell me what you heard today that is going to cause you, and what is going to be. It's going to cause you to think differently, speak differently, do differently based on what you heard today. My number is 305-384-6894. Once again, 305-384-6894. Work on your game. Dre all